A wonderful good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Director General. It's wonderful to be here in this beautiful Palais des Nations. And ladies and gentlemen, what a year this is. 2019, 100 years of the ILO, 20 years of the Convention 182, the convention of the ILO that has the highest ratification rate. And today, we actually are one day late. We are commemorating the World Day Against Child Labor that happened yesterday, and it's going to be our theme in the first of a number of thematic fora here in this beautiful room. And we're making it our issue, the fight against child labor. Let me borrow a quote from Jane Goodall. What you do makes a difference. And you have to decide what kind of difference you make. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would commend you on your struggle up to now, on your fight up to now. And I know that the issue of the fight against child labor is very close to the heart of the Secretary General of the ILO. Guy Ryder, thank you very much for opening this session today.
Connie, thank you so much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, thank you for being here today. And indeed, it is a really special day. It's a special place. I think this room is the right place to have this event. And of course, it's an enormous pleasure to have so many people in the room, people who have long dedicated their efforts to elimination of child labour. And some of our very special guests I want to particularly welcome Kumi Naidu, who will be speaking in a little while. Kumi, welcome back to the ILO. Connie, as you said, this is the very first of the Centenary ILC thematic forums that will be taking place in the coming days. And how appropriate it is that the very first of these thematic debates at our Centenary conference should be dedicated to the issue of child labour. We're just that one day late in commemorating the World Day, but that's just a matter of our scheduling. We've been commemorating this World Day now for 17 years, but the task of getting rid of child labour has been at the heart of this organisation for a great deal longer than that. Ever since the creation of our organisation, the elimination of child labour has been a top priority. If you look back, you'll see that 2 of the first 6 conventions that were adopted by the ILO addressed exactly this issue. And I've looked back at the history books. I can find the first recorded piece of regulation against child labour. It's actually from my own country. There may be others. Dates back to 1802. So we're not doing something new here. We'd all like to believe that we're moving forward towards the end of a very long struggle, but aware that a lot still remains to be done. Today, and the ILO has had a lot to do with this, the abolition of child labour is recognised as being the realisation of one of the fundamental labour and human rights in the world, along with the other package of fundamental rights. And what has been, I think, extraordinary, and Connie, you've referred to it, is that this very long history of struggle against child labour has gathered extraordinary new momentum over the last 20 years and since the adoption of Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labour. It's universally endorsed, and we are nearly there at universal ratification. That's going to be a tremendous moment. I wish it could have been today. It's going to be tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, when we can come together and celebrate the universal ratification of Convention 182. This is an occasion to thank all of those who have contributed so much to the fantastic progress that we have made. And the journey has been a remarkable one, and many of you have been there for the duration of it. We can all remember, I think, the momentum that led up to the adoption of Convention 182, How many of us were there when the marchers of the Global March Against Child Labour joined delegates at our conference in 1998? I was fortunately there and called for this new standard to come into being. And it was, Convention 182, the very first convention in the history of our organisation to have been adopted unanimously, and the first one to be negotiated without the need of recourse to a vote. That in itself is remarkable, and I think is already a precursor of the unanimity that has grown up in the international community to bring this struggle to its proper end. And colleagues, in the years after the convention was adopted, it became rapidly the most ratified convention in the history of the ILO. Strange, isn't it, that a relatively new convention, you know, in our long history, 20 years isn't really that much. We're quite an old organisation. But in those 20 years, ratification has been so rapid that Convention 182 is now the most ratified convention that we have. If you think back, I wonder who can remember the first 3 countries to ratify the convention. Seychelles, good old Seychelles, well done. Then Malawi, and then the United States of America. So things really were very special when in 1999, President Clinton signed into ratification the convention. We are joined today by the representatives of 2 countries who were not at the end, but have been not at the beginning, but are coming in towards the end of this journey towards universal ratification. I want to particularly welcome our friend Santosh Kumar Gangwar, the Minister of State for Labour and Employment of India, and also Mr. Woldeyesus Gulay, the Director General of Labour from the Ministry of Labour and Human Welfare of Eritrea. It's very important, sir, that you are with us today. I think then we can be proud of progress made. Countries in every region of the world have taken legislative and practical action to bring child labour to an end. And I guess the good news is that since the year 2000, since the beginning of this century and this millennium, there are now 90 million fewer children in child labour. There are now 90 million less than there were at the beginning of the century. No small achievement. But of course, that is no reason either to rest on our laurels, because the bad news in this equation, and you all know it, is that there are still 152 million children in child labour, 73 million of whom are in hazardous work. And if anybody has trouble visualising what that really means to people, take a look at the virtual reality show that's just outside here to see what child work in gold mining, in this case, actually means. We must work then together to continue to accelerate the pace of progress, scale up our action, and meet that target 8.7 of the 2030 agenda to end child labour in all of its forms by 2025. These are all very good reasons for us to be together today. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. As I look around the room, I see more familiar faces. I see Asafa Bekele, who was at the very beginnings, in my experience, of the growth of ILO work in respect of child labour. Asafa, it's great to see you here as well. So that's it from me. Let me hand over then again to our moderator, Connie. We've had you here before at the ILO. We know what a great job you do. I think you're going to lead us in a wonderful day of celebration for what has been achieved and recommitment to what still has to be achieved. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have taken the time to be with us here today and kick off this wonderful 100 minutes that we're going to spend together. And the Director General, of course, mentioned it. 152 million children are still in precarious work, in hazardous work. And we all have made another commitment, not just at the ILO, but within the UN system, the SDGs by 2025. We want to be down to that wonderful number called 0. Still a long way to go, still a lot of work, and we're going to be discussing later on in the panel discussion how we want to get there, how we can accelerate what is already on the road. But it is a very good practice here at the ILO to also listen to other voices, to eminent people, to eminent organizations, and we are very, very proud here to have today as the person giving us the kickoff into the day, the Secretary General of Amnesty International. Now, of course, Amnesty International stands by definition for the defense of human rights, the freedom of speech, and by extrapolation, of course, the freedom from work for children. And the wonderful thing is I could give you all the CV of Dr. Kumi Naidoo, but I think one of the extraordinary things is you all know about Greta Thunberg. Well, she was already 16 when she started her Thrive, and we're not quite sure how long that's going to go on. But the gentleman talking to us started to fight for freedom, started to fight for human rights at the age of 15. So you were a year earlier, and you started at school and actually got expelled for it with a boycott against racial discrimination, of course, then in South Africa. We are very, very happy that you're here to give us an eagle's view and also sort of maybe take us into the world of the structures that allow for child labor as they are. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give him a big hand, Dr. Kumi Naidoo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Connie, for that kind introduction. Following Guy Ryder reminds me of a moment during the South African liberation struggle when you had a good, solid presentation like that. You started by saying, most of the really good points I wanted to make have been eloquently made by the previous speaker. And then you said, however, for emphasis, and you spoke for about 2 hours. But I should say that during that first struggle at the age of 15, in my first march, the slogan at the front of the march was, "We want equality, we want equality." By the time the slogan got to the back of the march, the younger kids were chanting, "We want a color TV, we want a color TV," because they thought that was what the slogan at the front of the march was, because kids in white schools had color TVs and kids in black schools had no TVs. And if I'm brutally honest with you, at that age of 15, I probably wanted equality and a color TV equally. But seriously, we are at a moment where we are seeing a convergence of multiple crises in a very concentrated time. We've had the financial crisis, the ongoing poverty crisis, the gender inequality crisis, and what underpins everything now is a climate crisis. In fact, the moment of history that we find ourselves has been described as a time of global moral panic, where we are seeing the rise of authoritarian power, oligarchic wealth, deepening inequality, xenophobia, and underpinning all of that is the reality of the fact that the climate scientists told us in October that we have 12 months to get emissions to peak and come down before we're on the route to irreversible, catastrophic, life-threatening climate change. Now, the good thing about the climate change story, I just want to say to you, you probably heard people like myself say, save the planet, and so on. The good news is the planet is fine. The planet does not need saving. If we continue on the pathway that we are, the end result would be we will be gone, but the planet will still be here. The good news is once we become extinct as a species, the forests will grow back, the oceans will replenish, and so on. So understand, the struggle to avert catastrophic climate change is nothing more and nothing less about us getting serious about protecting our children and their children's future. That is a task that we cannot ignore because it is about human survival. And it is deeply disturbing that children have taken the lead in this fight rather than adults, right? That what does it say about us as adults that 15-year-olds have to go out every Fridays to get the adults to stand up and take notice? Just as largely too many powerful people ignored the obscenity of child labor, we continue to ignore the voices of children pleading to us. Greta Thunberg, for example, said to me that, you know, when we're growing up, our children, our parents says, don't play with fire, don't go near the stove. Now our whole planet is on fire, and our parents are cooling off somewhere and thinking that our politicians and business leaders will deliver without the kind of pressure that is needed. So what we have is a crisis of politics. Faced with such a great threat to the very survival of humankind, faced with the complex effects of globalization, from inequality to conflict to migration, so many of our leaders, sadly, have resorted to lazy politics of fear and blame. With a few shining exceptions, I want to suggest that current global leadership is not up to the task, and we should recognize our weaknesses so that we can rise to meet the challenges. It's also a crisis of imagination. We are so addicted to our patterns of production and consumption that they have become an inescapable prison for all of us. In a world which demands more faster, cheaper, which obsesses over ever-accelerating growth, it is a little short of inevitable that the most vulnerable children will be denied their childhoods and forced to work. To confront this, what we need in the face of this is not a little tweaking here and there. Rather, what we need is a complete system overall. What we should have understood after the 2008 global financial crisis, the response of power, of corporate power as well as governmental power, was system recovery, system protection, system maintenance. What we needed at that moment was to look at what was happening in our economy and say what is needed is system redesign, system innovation, and system transformation. And that is still the task ahead of us. If any of us think that we are going to solve the crises that we are facing in the world today by rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while humanity sinks, we are deluding ourselves. And I want to note that child labor is one of the glaring manifestations of a broken system which prizes productivity over everything else, drives the overconsumption which afflicts us all, and therefore fuels the climate crisis which is going to destroy us unless we get real. Child labor is a grave ill in its own right. The poorest children are deprived of a childhood, and the fundamental right to education is often stripped away. But child labor also holds up a mirror to an ugly humanity about what kind of societies we are and what we need to become and hopefully want to become. As we gather here today, there is every chance that your breakfast or shower this morning was tainted by child labor. Some of the world's largest companies are selling food, cosmetics, and other staples containing palm oil from Indonesia, where Amnesty found children as young as 8 were working in hazardous conditions. The children were accompanying their parents in order to help them meet excessively high targets or avoid penalties that often prevented them from making minimum wage. These children were working without safety equipment on plantations where toxic pesticides were used and carried heavy sacks of palm fruit weighing between 12 and 25 kilograms. Some of them had dropped out of school altogether to work with their parents for most of the day. Others worked after school or during the weekends. Thankfully, this particular case that I referred to has been resolved through struggles by civil society in that country, and the company in question has now ensured that at least minimum wage is committed and overtime is paid for extra hours worked. However, one of the worst manifestations of child labor, this is not always understood as child labor, is the reality of child soldiers. Some 300,000 children are currently estimated to be fighting in conflicts around the world, and hundreds of thousands more are part of armed forces who could be sent into conflict. Most child soldiers are between the ages of 15 and 18, but recruitment starts on a significant scale in certain places around the age of 10, and the use of even younger child soldiers has been recorded. Whether they have been coerced or simply joined out of desperation, the experience of child soldiers is at the most grotesque end of human experience. In conflicts past and present, from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Sri Lanka, from Colombia to Sierra Leone, children often suffer higher casualty rates because of a lack of skill, and they are usually sent as fodder on the most dangerous assignments. In this context, what is the future should we be fighting for? As we all know, Sustainable Development Goal 8.7 says that we must, and I quote, take immediate and effective measures to eradicate forced labor, end modern slavery and human trafficking, and secure the prohibition and elimination of the worst forms of child labor, including recruitment and use of child soldiers, and by 2025, end child labor in all its forms. I think we must take a holistic view where we not only look at the phenomenon of child labor, but also the very systems which drive children into work at such a high cost. We need system redesign, not system tinkering. Now, when we look at the climate crisis and we see how this has driven us to the verge of a cliff where humanity might be looking at the real possibility of extinction, we have to recognize that it is a crisis of overconsumption, and we need to recognize today that the greatest disease that humanity is facing is not the disease of influenza or anything else, but it is a disease we could call affluenza. Affluenza is a psychological, pathological illness where people believe that happiness and meaningful life comes from more material acquisitions. The climate crisis was created by the rich, the ones who can afford to consume and consume, who demand continuous growth and production. Yet those who are at the greatest risk are the poorest people in the world. So it would be truly unethical if some of the poorest and powerless people were exploited through positive efforts to address the climate crisis. Yet, this is exactly what is happening in the global battery industry by way of example, which is powering vital green industries like the production of electric vehicles as well as your cell phones. Today, there's a very good chance that all of us are sitting with some element of child labor with us. So what am I talking about? In 2016, Amnesty and AfriWatch, a Congolese NGO, looked at the whole question of cobalt mining in the DRC and recognizing that lithium-ion batteries, 65% of the source of those products come out of the DRC. Around 1/5 of that total is estimated to come from mining by hand, and UNICEF estimated that around 40,000 boys and girls work in dangerous artisanal mines. We found in our research children as young as 7 working alongside adults. Our report traced this cobalt into supply chains of some of the brand's leading electronics and electric vehicle brands in the world. So it would be a bit ironical if, for example, people in Europe and North America suddenly feel good about themselves because now they're driving electric vehicles and they're not harming the environment and not contributing to climate pollution, but on the other hand, are actually part and parcel of a horrific system of child labor. Our demand here is very simple. We say to the cell phone industry, to the renewable industry more generally, to the electric car industry, for example, we have challenged them within the next 5 years to develop an ethical battery that is good for the environment on the one hand and is devoid of child labor or any other human rights exploitation. I offer this example of the battery industry and the car industry and the electronics industry as an example. So this is not the overall point, because the point is simple. Of course, we need to have massive change in our economy to an economy that's driven by clean, green, renewable-based energy rather than an economy that's driven by dirty, brown, fossil fuel-based economy. And that is a very big challenge if we're going to stand a chance to avert catastrophic climate change. But surely humanity can be better. We don't have to do this in a way that exploits children or exploits anybody else in the production of those. So in conclusion, we need a more joined-up way of thinking about global justice, which recognize all the different aspects. We cannot allow producers to offer customers with a false choice of people or planet. This will not deliver the sustainable changes we need to save humanity from deepening inequality, deepening injustice, and from climate devastation. Only by thinking boldly and differently does humanity have a chance to get out of this mess. I want to remind you in conclusion of the words of Albert Einstein when he said once that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get different results. Today, as the ILO reaches this very important milestone, I would like to say to the leadership and the different constituencies of the ILO, a unique organization that humanity created to advance justice at work, that we need to ask some much bigger, bolder, and troubling questions. One, is the growth model that we have the right model to deliver labor rights? A growth model that deepens inequality and that actually, if we look at how we measure GDP, it's problematic because, every forest you chop down, every bad thing you do on the environment is a net positive in terms of GDP measurement, for example. So we need to be asking, is the model that we have of how we understand growth the right one? Secondly, we have to ask whether the levels of inequality between the rich and poor can be sustained. The answer patently is no. And how do we reduce inequality much faster? And lastly, we have to ask the question, can, in the way we address child labor, in the way we address labor exploitation, can we do that in a way that gives us a multiple human rights win? What I mean by that is, can we do that in a way that is conscious of indigenous people's rights and the children of indigenous peoples? Can we do that in a way that advances gender equality and also to ensure that young girls do not go into child labor? Can we do that in a way that advances all the communities of people that are socially excluded because they might be defined as minorities and so on? I believe it's within our capability to ask these big questions and to rise them. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to address, but history will judge us harshly if all we do at this moment when we are in such a deep existential crisis is do minor incremental changes and minor improvements here and there. This is a time for us to have the courage to say that the system of economics and politics that we have created over time is broken, and what is needed is bold, courageous thinking about how we can move it forward so that we can address child labor as well as a whole range of other constituencies within the labor environment that are exploited. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kumi. Thank you very much, Dr. Naidu. And if I might add, even one worst part is if we're talking about the Earth system, we're talking about sort of 8 different facets. And we're already not just as far as climate change is concerned, but we are already over the limits on at least 4 of these. So there is a hell of a lot of work to do. So thank you very, very much for setting that framework and also for putting the questions to us that each and every one of us has to answer. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point I would love to acknowledge the presence of a number of ministers here in the room, and thank you very much for endorsing the importance of the issue today by being present. I'm aware of the fact that a minister from Ghana is here, Uzbekistan, and we also of course have the Deputy Prime Minister from Uzbekistan who is going to be part of our panel discussion in the moment. And with that, I would sort of like to go from the big picture again to the topic at hand that we're talking about today. And Guy Ryder said there's only one missing, so we are at number 186. And of those 186 countries, of course, there were a number that sort of recently signed up to signing and ratifying the convention. And it is, of course, a special moment when a big country signs up. The second most populous country in the world being India, of course. And that means that a lot of children get actually under the protective umbrella that is given by the convention. And we must not forget, and Guy Ryder also mentioned that 21 years ago, the Global March movement started in India. So we're very happy, and I'm not quite sure whether you, Mr. Ryder, actually mentioned the name Kailash Satyarthi, but of course he's been here a number of times in this room speaking about the issue, and the Indian Nobel Peace laureate, of course, has been carrying forward the fight against child labor. And so it is with great pleasure that I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of State for Labor and Employment from India, Santosh Kumar Gangwar, to come and join us here at the podium. Thank you very much for addressing us.
Good morning to all of you, and Director General ILO, Mr. Guy Ryder, ladies and gentlemen. It's given me immense pleasure to address this gathering in the context of World Day Against Child Labor. In the contrary year of ILO efforts for tackling child labor and promoting decent work over the course of its 100-year-long journey is commendable. And I can thank Mr. Guy Ryder is doing very well in this respect. Children are our future, hence we should do everything in our capacity to provide a strong foundation to our children in terms of education, health, and build a strong human capital. Our focus should also be to implement policies and schemes that aim at alleviating poverty, promote free and compulsory education of children, and generate employment so that there is no child labor in future. Our laws need to be strong that prevent child labor and punish those who employ them for work. India is committed to eradicate child labor. We have adopted a holistic and multidimensional approach to eliminate child labor. From the country, it is in a phased manner. We have amended our Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986, which came into effect on 1st September 2016. This amendment now completely prohibits employment or work of children below 14 years in any occupation or process, and moves a step ahead by prohibiting employment of adolescent in hazardous occupation and processes. And we doing in such a way in this respect that in our country, every district, we are going to monitor them in this respect. The DM is responsible for this. With this enactment coming into force, India has been able to ratify two fundamental international labor organizations, Conventions 138 and 182. After ratification, Convention 182 is now covering births 99% children, and coverage of Convention 138 has been increased from about 60% to 80%. With these ratifications, India has sent out a strong message to the world that it will not tolerate child labor in any of its form. We are also implementing the National Child Labor Projects scheme in rehabilitating working children. The scheme aims to eliminate all forms of child labor through identification and withdrawal of all children in the project area from child labor, and preparing children withdrawal from work from mainstream education along with vocational training. About 1.4 million children have been rehabilitated under this scheme. To ensure effective enforcement of the provisions of the Child Labour Act and smooth implementation of the NCLP scheme, a separate online portal pencil that is platform for effective enforcement for no child labor has been launched. It has been various components, namely child tracking system, complaint corner, state government, national child labor project, and convergence. At this occasion, I would urge the ILO and its forum to further develop on the achievement so far by creating an international platform for tackling the problem of child trafficking along with child labor, as the two are often interrelated. Our determination and commitment to create a child labor-free India remains strong. Approach and steps taken by us validate this, and we will continue to take efforts to reach our goal. I would conclude by congratulating ILO on its achievement and outcome in this area and wish ILO all the success in its endeavor. Thanking you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for this statement, for this intervention. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start our panel discussion. And for that, I would like to invite my panelists to come up on stage, one after the other. And maybe you could accompany them by giving them a hand to share their thoughts with us. I would like to invite, first of all, Mrs. Tanzila Narbayeva. She is the Deputy Prime Minister of Uzbekistan. If you could join us here, that's wonderful. Ms. Jacqueline Mugo, Executive Director of the Federation of Kenyan Employers. Madam. I would like Mrs. Junera Martins Batista, Women's Secretary of the Single Confederation of Workers, CUTE, of Brazil, to join us as well. Do you get the message? Women power. I know that you have a special session tomorrow. And we continue with another lady, Phyllis Kongwayu, Human Rights and Sustainable Sourcing Specialist at Ferrero. Phyllis, thank you for joining us. Mrs. Sue Longley, General Secretary of the International Union of Food, Agriculture, Hotel, Restaurant, Catering, Tobacco and Allied Workers Association. Thank you for being with us. I got the sequence wrong, sorry, my bad. I think you have already been mentioned, so I would like Mr. finally, Sefa Bekele, founder and executive director of the African Child Policy Forum, and well known to everybody here in this debate, onto stage. And last but not least, Mrs. Molly Nairembe. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Molly. She's the young advocate and she's a Scream trainer. And we're going to hear about what Scream is all about from Uganda. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you, Molly. And before we get started, Mr. Bekwela, you're not afraid, are you? You're not afraid. Good, wonderful. So, Mrs. Narbayeva, your country, Uzbekistan, has addressed the issue of child labor. It's already running many, many programs. So you've embraced the idea. How do you bridge the difference between sort of the overall framework and what is done and felt on the ground? Is there no?
Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа, уважаемый господин Гайрайдер. В первую очередь разрешите поблагодарить всех организаторов данного мероприятия за то, что пригласили Узбекистан в качестве страны, которая имеет опыт по ликвидации детского принудительного труда. Вы правильно отметили, что наша страна имеет действительно достаточный опыт, хотя со дня ратификации прошло совсем немного времени. Наша страна ратифицировала конвенции касательно детского труда в 2008 году. До этого в стране были стереотипы, что дети должны помогать своим родителям, фермерам, дети должны участвовать в большом деле по сбору хлопка. И до этого буквально более 2 миллионов детей были вовлечены в процесс сбора урожая хлопка. И надо признать, что ратификация конвенции – это не решение проблемы. Ратификация конвенции – это 50% решения проблемы, остальное – это имплементация в национальное законодательство норм, международных норм. Первое. И второе, самое главное, изменение правоприменительной практики и мышления всего населения, особенно фермеров, особенно работодателей. И в данном направлении Узбекистан столкнулся с очень большими проблемами, но на помощь к нам пришла Международная организация труда, которая вот именно до 2013 года Узбекистан попадал в список 25 стран, которые не выполняли конвенции по детскому труду. И в данном направлении Международная организация труда с 2013 года начала активное сотрудничество с правительством Узбекистана, с институтами гражданского общества по не только имплементации национального законодательства, в национальное законодательство норм международного права, но и по изменению мышления, по изменению поведения всех людей. И мы работу вели по нескольким направлениям. Первое – это изменение национального законодательства. Второе – это повышение потенциала всех руководителей государственных органов, всех фермеров, всех представителей власти на местах. Третье направление – с помощью Международной организации труда мы начали проводить международный мониторинг использования вот как раз-таки детского труда на хлопкоуборочной, на полях в сельском хозяйстве. Следующее направление – это проведение национального мониторинга силами профсоюзов и представителей гражданского общества. Следующее направление – это постоянный анализ системы мер, предпринимаемых нашим правительством по реализации конвенции. Это мы делали вместе с Международной организацией труда. И последняя, немаловажная мера – это внедрение механизма обратной связи с населением. То есть на базе Федерации профсоюзов Узбекистана, на базе Министерства занятости постоянно действующий, круглосуточно работающий механизм обратной связи с населением, который позволял выявлять проблемы и решать их на месте. То есть вот эта работа, которая была начата с 2013 года, она продолжается по настоящее время. Мы в рамках вот этих мероприятий утвердили страновую программу сотрудничества с Международной организацией труда. Мы ратифицировали 87-ю конвенцию, которая оставалась одной из 8 нератифицированных Узбекистаном. Мы сегодня принесли подарок господину Гайрайдеру. Мы ему обещали в ходе его визита в Узбекистан, что мы ратифицировать должны еще несколько конвенций. И мы ратифицировали 144-ю конвенцию. Подарок – это Международная организация труда и Узбекистану. И кроме этого, мы сегодня в течение последующих 2 месяцев будем ратифицировать еще 2 конвенции и дополнительный протокол к 29-й конвенции. Это современные формы вот именно рабства. И в данном направлении мы будем продолжать работу. И я считаю, что вот работа – это не для того, чтобы не попасть в состав 25 стран. Работа нужна для народа Узбекистана, работа нужна для наших детей. И высока очень приверженность нового президента Узбекистана Шавката Мирзиёева, который на полях 72-й сессии Генеральной Ассамблеи ООН заявил о своей высокой приверженности и высокой приверженности работе с Международной организацией труда по внедрению стандартов не только в сфере ликвидации детского и принудительного труда, но и всех других стандартов в сфере труда. Спасибо.
Thank you very much for that very strong statement. And maybe we have a second round where we can talk about how to keep up the momentum. I would now like to address almost simultaneously two ladies, Jacqueline Mugo, Executive Director of the Federation of Kenyan Employers, and Junea Martins-Batista, Women's Secretary of CUTE, that sounds cute, from Brazil. We're talking about acceleration. In your case, Jacqueline, we have already seen what you've done with Business Africa, that you've sort of started the movement. You're involved with the 8.7 Alliance. And how do you spread both the framework, but also how do you convince people to actually act upon it?
Thank you very much.
Should be working. Maybe you've just changed. I think our sound engineer was under the impression that you were using your own microphone.
It seemed to be dead. Yeah. Okay, it's working. First, let me say what a pleasure it is for me to speak on behalf of employers about this very important issue of child labor. And to say that the first thing is that employers actually do support the idea of universal ratification of not just the main ILO conventions, but the specific convention 182, which seeks to eliminate child labor in the world. It is true, as the DG was saying, that we are very close to that. So one of the appeals we'd like to make is for the countries, and I know there are many represented here, to make a commitment towards this. Employers have done a lot, not just in Africa, but globally, towards this goal of elimination of child labor. We were quite instrumental in the passing of one of the key instruments towards eliminating child labor. That is the 1998 Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, which would contribute significantly, especially to those countries that have not ratified the convention, to be able to respect, promote, and put in place measures on the ground to prepare them before ratification, to respect the principles behind that. Because I think, as the previous speaker rightly said, it's not just about ratification. It's about policy measures, policy initiatives, commitments, and actually acknowledging that child labor is a complex issue that requires a lot of different initiatives for it to work. So the initiative by the employers in coming up with this 1998 declaration gives room for work to start well ahead of ratification. The second thing is that employers actually do create a safe environment for companies that are their members to have discussions in what could be possible links, possible spots in their supply chains where child labor could be happening and they don't know, because the fact is that companies do not support child labor, but it could, down the supply chain, exist. So this is a discussion that is important so that action can be taken by companies in a positive way towards addressing and eliminating child labor in the supply chains in a manner that would not put children into greater jeopardy, eliminating jobs and that kind of thing. A priority issue for us as employers is also addressing the disconnect between the top-down measures and the lived experiences for workers, for communities, and business on the ground. We think that focusing too much on standards, initiatives, and activities at the global level can, in a way, absorb too much of our attention away from the actual engagement on the ground. What is happening in the agricultural sector? What is happening in the salt mines? What is happening in the hotel industry when it comes to child labor? So I think actual action on the ground is something that we strongly support, because we know that there is a wide variety of international instruments that focus on child labor, and these are good. They have been mentioned, they are known in this house, they've been talked about, but beyond those instruments is actions which can practically be taken on the ground. And in Africa, a lot of work has happened, and in other parts of the world, in looking at areas where child labor existed in the formal economy. And I think by and large, that has been addressed. The thing about child labor is that it's a hidden phenomenon. So you do have to address it in the informal economy, which is a huge part of the economy in the developing countries. And that is where the challenge exists in the world today. We continue to work towards this end in the Alliance 8.7, in policy initiatives as employers on the ground, hoping that sooner or later we'll be able to eliminate child labor.
Jacqueline, Ms. Moore, maybe I'll leave the question with you also. As the Deputy Prime Minister was saying, you need to change the mindset.
Yes.
So what you do about that? Maybe we do that in the second question that I'll throw to you. Meanwhile, I would like to address Junea Martins Batista. Junea, when we talk about child labor, of course, the unions have a strong stance and they support, again, the framework. What role do you see in the fight against child labor that you're playing right at the moment? Yes, it's working. It's working.
Alô?
Yes.
Me ouvem? Buenos dias. Eu hablo portunhol. Espero que as intérpretes consigam me interpretar. Primeiro, queria agradecer muito a invitação de participar de fórum tão importante e dizer que Brasil já ha ratificado os convênios 182, como o convênio 38, que falava sobre trabalho infantil. E a Constituição Federal de meu país também garantizou que nenhum jovem poderia trabalhar antes de los 14 anos, e se trabalhasse, tinha que ser chamado em português jovem aprendiz, que tinha que trabalhar com uma jornada menor de trabalho e tinha que estar na escola. Então, isso é importante. E eu, como negociadora, como sindicalista, digo que o papel principal, o rol dos sindicatos, em meu país tentamos fazer isso todo o tempo, é negociar, fazer as negociações para ter trabalho decente, ter empregos dignos para toda a gente, com proteção social total. Isso significa garantizar políticas de saúde, educação universal e gratuitas. Temos isto em nossa Constituição. Também trabalhamos nos últimos anos sobre o tema de trabalho infantil. Hicimos conferências e documentos e pequenos informes, libretas, onde dizíamos que nós e nossotras de la CUT não defendemos o trabalho infantil. Acompanhamos o debate sobre os Objetivos de Desenvolvimento do Milênio, sobre eliminar as formas de discriminação, as formas de trabalho infantil até 2030. Outra coisa que também, para terminar, que eu creio que é importante, como negociadora, como sindicalista, é que em meu país temos muitas trabalhadoras de hogar, que conseguiram na lei, graças à presidenta Dilma, no ano 2015, que garantiu que essas mulheres tenham trabalho decente e digno. Isso está muito, agora, com muitos problemas, porque estamos vivendo dias de inferno em meu país. Defendemos também as trabalhadoras campesinas. Todo hablo de pessoas adultas. Sim, que não queremos ninhas trabalhando como trabalhadora de hogar, campesinas, ninhas trabalhando como campesinas. E a ideia é que podamos empoderar essas pessoas, em sua maioria mulheres, para que tenham uma vida decente. Isso significa que, tendo trabalho decente, é provável que consigamos eliminar o trabalho infantil. Por último, dizer que muchos programas para eliminar el trabajo infantil, para las familias no poner sus hijos a trabajar en el campo, a trabajar en las calles pidiendo cosas. El gobierno de Lula y Dilma hicieron, por ejemplo, un programa que se llamaba Bolsa Familia, que era una forma de transferencia de la renta para que los niños pudieran ir a la escuela. Tenían que provar los padres y madres que el hijo estaba en la escuela. Entonces, eso era muy importante para nosotros en Brasil. Pero ahora estamos viviendo un día muy triste en mi país, un momento muy triste, donde mañana vamos a hacer una huelga general, porque la vida está muy dura y porque tenemos nuestro principal líder arrestado por un complot que no sabemos, estamos ahora descubrindo todo. Y quería terminar diciendo que queremos Lula libre.
Thank you very much. I would like, with my questions, to turn to one specific area. We know that it's about 70% of children that are identified as being in child labor are working in agriculture, and as Ms. Mugo said, both in the formal and informal sector. I mean, of course, agriculture is also differentiated in that. Sue, of course, with the wide umbrella that your union represents, how can you actually get those? I think, when you work together with big companies, big agricultural companies, it's almost easier to get a hold on it. But when we look at agriculture being fragmented, being smallhold farmers, how can you actually help work against child labor?
Yes, thank you, Connie. Good morning to everybody. I think 3 key messages on that issue. I have to say, as a global trade union, we don't see any contradiction at all between standards and working on the ground. We very much think that standards and working on the ground are complementary. But as the Prime Minister from Uzbekistan said, it's also about implementation after ratification. In a way, sadly, this is not my first appearance in this hall or in this building talking about this issue. I think in 2007 I was here at the launch of the International Partnership for Cooperation on Child Labour in Agriculture. And as you've just said, very regrettably, agriculture remains the main user of child labour, 70% of child labour, and we're not seeing progress. Kumi outlined improvements on one plantation in Indonesia, but regrettably, that's not the case in many millions of plantations. So millions of children still doing that dangerous work, heavy work, using pesticides. So I think really we need to accept that and make sure that there's a real focus on elimination of child labour in agriculture. As you said, most of this child labour is on small and family farms, but the ILO estimates 1 in 5 in commercial farms. And I think we should look at the synergies there. What can big commercial companies be doing to help small farmers? And of course, some of this child labour on small farms is going into big commercial supply chains, and I'm sure we'll hear about working cocoa. But I think for me, the other key message as a trade union is, we've welcomed the initiatives, but we've seen lots of targeted actions looking specifically at child labour in different commodities, different areas. But I think now we need to look much more honestly at a holistic approach. And we would very much support the ideas that are coming forward about a new model of production. I mean, frankly, agriculture is still based on feudal relations, slave conditions, bonded labour. So we're all for changing the model, looking at agriculture that is much more climate sensitive instead of the main producer of greenhouse gases and the main user of water. But in trade union terms, this means, I think, a much more holistic look at the whole application of the fundamental principles. And as a trade union, Convention 87, freedom of association, is critical for us. Now, again, in this House in 2015, the ILO produced its own report giving a voice to rural workers. And it said, so it was the ILO's own report said that conditions in some of the farms and plantations had not changed from when Convention 11, one of my favorites, on freedom of association in agriculture was adopted. Conditions were still the same. And I think we really need to look at those barriers to freedom of association for agricultural workers and removing them, something that governments have to do, something that companies have to make sure they're doing. And I would say it's the same solution for the agricultural workers we represent and the small farmers. Because in a way, the barrier for small farmers, frankly, is economic. It's often down to prices. And what they need is the right to come together, to organize, to have leverage in the supply chain, to get better technical cooperation, and to get fairer prices for their crops. So like agricultural workers in relation to their employers, it's about the real freedom of association in rural areas to give workers and small farmers bargaining power at their end of the chain.
Thank you very much for sharing those initiatives, Sue. And I'm not quite sure that we all have sort of different hats, but whoever we are, we also have the hat of a consumer. And I'm not quite sure what your fancy is, whether you like chocolate, whether you like nuts. I mean, in the end, I would like to eat or enjoy the pleasure of whatever produce I'm using and not have a bad conscience, just as much as when Mr. Ryder was mentioning, Mr. Naidu was mentioning, when I use my phone, I would like to not have a bad conscience. So we need the supply chain to be working, and Phyllis, your company, Ferrero, of course, stands for sweets. I would like my sweets to be sweet. How do you achieve that? How do you make me, as a customer, feel happy? How do you avoid child labor, especially in those areas where, for example, hazelnuts are grown that are one of the main constituents of your produce?
So thank you very much, Connie. And I'm very happy and honored to be here representing the private sector to give you a bit of a concrete example of what we have done to eliminate child labor with a concrete example of hazelnut supply chain in Turkey. So for those who don't know who Ferrero is, we are obviously a chocolate company. So we produce chocolates, including products like Nutella, Ferrero Rocher, as well as Kinder. So we actually have 23 international manufacturing plants. So it also means that our global sourcing activities are worldwide. So our main top raw materials include cocoa, sugar, hazelnut, palm oil, as well as some milk powder. So I'm going to give a very quick and concrete example of what we have done on hazelnut. So for hazelnut, because we source most of our hazelnut from the country Turkey, which Turkey actually produces around 75% of the hazelnut worldwide. So we actually have encountered a lot of challenges of sourcing hazelnut in Turkey because of a number of challenges that I'm going to mention. So the first one is that we understand that there are a lot of social issues, particularly child labor, in our supply chain in Turkey. So it also found out from one of our social impact assessment that we have done with a local NGO, child labor is prevalent in our hazelnut farms. It's also because it's derived from the domestic migration phenomenon, where families from the southeastern part of Turkey, they migrate from one place to the other place, and in the end, they end up in hazelnut farms and pick the hazelnuts. And obviously, the children come along with their family to pick the hazelnut, where a lot of children are also performing harvesting activities. And we understand that there are a lot of social issues, and it is really we do have a responsibility to eliminate these issues. And then the second challenge that we are facing is the complexity of the supply chain. So the difficulty is, as a business, how do we draw the line to leverage on the ground, and how do we know where do we have the sphere of influence? So just to give you a very quick example of how the supply chain works, so companies normally buy hazelnut from a supplier, and supplier buy directly or indirectly from a hazelnut processing company, and those processing companies, they buy directly or indirectly to farmers, where farmers hire the workers directly or indirectly. So you can see how complicated our supply chain is. So from a company point of view, it's very hard for us to get information and exercise activities on the ground. And thirdly, and also more importantly, and everybody on the floor knows about it, child labor is a systemic issue which really requires a systemic solution. As a company ourselves, we cannot do it alone, but we do need collaboration with local NGOs, with government, and also working together with the ILO, and to make sure that our operation is adhering to policy as well as international conventions. So one of the solutions that we have found, apart from the fact that we actually do have our own hazelnut program on the ground, where people training farmers and etc., and providing education activities for children, but we're also developing a public-private partnership project together with the local Turkish government as well as the ILO. So the project that we have been working on started already in 2014, and currently is running in the phase. It's running up to the third phase. So it's a collaboration that is funded by Calbisco, which is a confectionery business association, and funded by the Dutch government. And in terms of the operation, is implemented by the local government, the Minister of Family, Social Security and Social Security of Turkey, as well as the local ILO. So what activities that we have been implementing is including building capability to local and also national institutions, implementing direct interventions activities to prevent children from working in the field, including providing catch-up educations, as well as medical and social service consultants for those seasonal workers' families. And obviously, it's very important is to raise awareness that child labor is really not acceptable in the hazelnut agriculture in Turkey. So we really do see that in terms of outcome, there is an increased awareness, and there's also an increased openness to talk about child labor. And we do really see there's less number of children working in the field. But the fact is, there is still children working in the field. So we are looking into accelerating this model to other hazelnut producing areas. And we're also hoping to not only focus on the hazelnut sector, because these children and the families are moving from one crop to the other crops. We also hope that to really completely contribute to the elimination of children working from the field, that also has to be accelerated in other agricultural sector in the field.
I would like to have a second round, and then I would like to address the question of how you can accelerate, like you've proven a couple of projects, but how you can actually take it to scale. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sit next to a wonderful and brave lady, and this time I'm going to actually pronounce your surname correctly, so sorry about the first time, Nami Rembe. And from now on known as Molly. Molly, you were actually, as a child, in child labor. You worked on a tea plantation. Could you share your story with us? Is that possible?
Yes, please. Thank you, Connie. It's a pleasure for me to be here and share my story with everybody else in the room. I should say it was only 2 years of my childhood that I was in child labor, but it's almost what I can remember about my childhood because of the memories. It all started in 2004 when my mother passed on, and she's the only family that I had known since my father died before I was a year old. So when she died, I and my sister stayed, just the two of us, in a child-headed family, and the only thing we knew how to do was work on a tea plantation. So we did this to ensure that we can collect enough money to keep me in school. My sister actually dropped out completely so she can do more work and raise more money. But I did school and work part-time. So my typical day was waking up in the morning, go to the tea plantation, pluck 2 baskets, and each basket was 1,000 shillings, Uganda shillings. So pluck 2 baskets, then go to school. At exactly 4, it was time to go back home. Every child was excited to go home, but I knew I had to go back to the plantation to carry the tea to a store. And I did this every day. I did that for a year until I completed my primary education. And when I was supposed to join secondary education, I watched the rest of my friends go to school for 1 whole term, since I had to collect enough money to join a new school. It was a new level. I needed a new uniform, admission, and the like, so I completely dropped out of school. During working on the farms, It involved waking up very early in the morning. The morning coldness and the dew, we had to endure that because that's the only thing we had to do for survival. We would pick tea for about 12 hours because we'd start at 7 and leave at 6 p.m. And sometimes on an empty stomach because there's no one back home to cook the food. So you either cook it in the morning and pack it or go to the farm and then eat later in the evening. This was so hard. In addition, there were so many injuries, insect bites. There were pesticides being sprayed, which would sometimes affect us. But we have to be on the farm because that's all we know how to do, and that's the only way we can survive. A reality struck me when I dropped out of school. I had 2 friends who were going to a nearby school. And every time they would go to school on the weekend, I would borrow their books and read so I do not miss out because I really wanted to stay in school. And I just sat down and thought, crying and mourning my mother is not going to help me anymore. It's not going to help both of us. It was time for me to look for another way of survival. And I looked out for friends of my late mom. And they supported me to look for my uncles and my paternal family. And that's where I was lucky to meet an uncle of mine who took me back to school. But even when I went to school, even when I was out of the exploitation, I kept thinking about those that I left behind because I knew they were still going through the same. I kept thinking of how best can I support them? Or how best can I support the other people that I may not have seen but are actually going through it? So when I reached the university, I decided to do social work for a course so I can be able to stay in the line of supporting children. And while I was at the university, I looked out for an organization that supports children so I can work with them and find a way of supporting others. And that's where I joined Somero Uganda. I found there a beautiful program called the International Labour Organization SCREAM program, which is supporting children's rights through education, the art, and media.
Maybe you can just catch your breath for 1 second. You've been so brave, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Molly, for having shared that which is still so deep inside of you and is unforgettable in a negative sense. But you are now actually doing what you intended to do. You work as a trainer for SCREAM, supporting children's rights in education, the arts, and the media program. How does it feel now to be involved in something positive, in something that quite obviously... I can now see, I'm not quite sure whether the gentlemen, ladies in the last row, now Molly is smiling just thinking about it. What does that mean for you?
For me, supporting the children is not just a job that I do for a pay, but it's a passion because I know what I am doing, I know how best to support them, and I know what can help them. So one thing I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that dealing with child labor is supposed to be two-way. As we withdraw the children in exploitation, we also have to think of preventing others from joining. So many times we focus on withdrawing, not knowing that as we withdraw, there are so many others who are joining. So me, I am using the methodology to do both of them. In prevention, I am working with school children, those who are living in areas where they are vulnerable to being exploited anytime. Children who do not have parents, children who stay on the coffee and tea plantations because their parents work there anytime. Every day is an emergency for them because at any time they can begin being exploited. So we come up with SCREAM clubs and we use them to create awareness in the community through music, through songs, through the dramas. But we also use these clubs to reach out to the duty bearers, the government people, the district people, to tell them, look, there is a problem here and we have a solution. We have had a challenge that there are so many beautiful policies in our country, but they're not being implemented because no one holds the government accountable, or no one knows who to hold accountable. So for us, we are advocating for smaller policies like bylaws in a community where these issues are happening. So far, we have achieved 2 bylaws in the 4 districts where I work, and we have seen this work. For prevention, for withdrawing children, I know it's not easy for you to just be withdrawn and then you go to school the following day. There's a lot of emotional support that you have to go through. There's a lot of preparation that you have to go through. So I work with the children to be able to build that resilience in them. You can still make it, to build the hope. You don't know what is going to work today, but just be positive, something will finally work out.
Molly, thank you very much. We're going to come back to you in a moment. Thank you so much. And as I was talking to Molly and you were listening, I saw Mr. Bekwele smile, because it is something that you've been working on with your heart and with your work proper for many, many years. You've been within the ILO system. You've supported and probably pushed the establishment of the convention, and you've now been founder and executive director of the African Child Policy Forum. So after we've heard the very personal story and also heart-rending story that Molly shared, there are millions of kids still out there. And of course, everybody's here now says, yes, we have to stop that straight away. We've heard Molly saying we need small steps. So where's, from your point of view, the solution? Where can we take it to scale? It's working. It's working.
All right, thank you.
Trust
Thank
our
you.
technicians.
Thank you so very much, Connie. And I'd like to express my appreciation at the way that you got this exceptionally moving testimony out of Molly. I thought you did it very well. I'll have to start with a personal observation, if I may, before I go into the substance of the issue. I really am very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Director General, for inviting me to be here. The ILO has been my life for many, many years. And we're very privileged, some of us, to be working and even being paid for working on such extremely important subject areas: social protection, child labor, social justice, and so on. And it was in this hall, I believe, that we debated the draft Convention 182. Wasn't it here, Simon? Yes. I see some friends who were here at the time. And little did we realize that the convention was to be adopted unanimously by the International Labour Conference at the time. Even more surprising was the realization, as we said today, that it is almost universally ratified. This is really a wonderful message. This is a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful thing to experience as well. I really think we should applaud, and I think we should express our appreciation by applauding the ILO for 100 years of social justice, I think, in my view. Much has been achieved over these years. I'm also glad that we're celebrating the centenary of the ILO with you, Guy Ryder, at the helm of this organization. Ever since I have known you, you have been a champion for the respect of the dignity of work. You have been fighting for it as long as I have known you, and I'm so glad that it's happening at the time when you are heading this organization. I'm very glad also to have been a small part, of course, of this journey. But we must recognize that this is an unfinished business. As a matter of fact, if I was consulted when we're celebrating this thing, I think the subtitle would be not only just 100 years of social justice, I would have said the unfinished business. We still have a long, long way to go. And in that respect, I have a message and a question for our Director General. The IPEC, the International Program on the Elimination of Child Labor, I would say, in fact, these were the words of a minister, it was the jewel in the crown of the ILO. And as you quite rightly said, Director General, we still have a long way to go. And I find it amazing and perplexing that at the time when there is still so much more to be done, that we should hear about the demise of this world premier program on the elimination of child labor. I think that's a very sad story indeed. So I thought I should express really my concern about this. Now, Connie, there are a number of issues that we could raise. Climate change, which Komi Naidu talked about, technological change. These are all important. Climate change for many poor households and poor families means the difference between life and death. Technology is a very complex business. Technology can sustain child labor, or it could lead to the elimination of child labor. In Africa, we have rather two worlds, parallel worlds. On one hand, you have the advanced technology dominated especially by the social media and in the service sector, which is making child labor somewhat redundant. On the other hand, in much of agriculture, the technology really has not changed. It's almost as it was in biblical times, which therefore means child labor is going to remain with us for a long time. But I want to sort of look at it. How much time do you have for me?
I would like you to pinpoint to the one thing where you, in your long experience, have seen where things have changed, so that in the second time...
Yes, how much time do I have? That's my question.
Not much more.
Not much more.
Sorry,
no,
1 minute.
Okay, no, that's not serious, Connie. The point is that we have enough experiences to show that things can change. Yeah. That do change. I'll tell you from our own experience. My organization monitors the performance of African governments, the child friendliness of African governments, which includes child labor, of course. And we do monitor the performance of all 53 African governments using the principles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Convention 182, Convention 138 as a basis, and informing them with the statistical data and using a number of indicators. And we found that the countries that were most child-friendly had a common set of characteristics, which is coming to your point. Namely, that the most child-friendly African governments adopted a two-pronged approach. One, they adopted laws that were consistent with international standards and implemented them. The second was that they adopted budgets that provided for the basic needs of children. If you really wanted to bring about a dramatic change in the situation of children, including the elimination of child labor, three important elements to bear in mind. One, laws to protect children, budgets to provide for them, and politics that put children at the heart of public policy. These three are the most important elements that you have to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much for pinpointing to these three aspects. Now, I've promised a second round. For time constraints at the beginning, it always feels like we have masses of time. It's getting a bit closer. So maybe just like Dr. Bekele's takeaways, Mrs. Narbayeva, you have been saying partnership is essential for your success, and it is also essential to accelerate. Why is that, and what quality do these partnerships have?
Спасибо большое, Кони, За очень интересный вопрос. Я хотела бы подтвердить слова Молли, которая сказала, борьба с детским трудом разделяется на два крупных направления. Это борьба с уже имеющимися фактами. И самое главное – это профилактика. Вот как раз-таки в сфере профилактики социальное партнерство играет самую-самую главную роль. В одиночку решить проблему невозможно. Ни правительство, ни профсоюзы, ни работодатели, они в одиночку эту проблему не смогут решить. Как Узбекистану удалось решить проблему? Мы с помощью Международной организации труда установили очень хороший социальный диалог между всеми сторонами на общественном уровне. Мы создали в 2013 году Координационный совет по вопросам детского труда. Туда входят представители государственных органов и представители общественных организаций. На уровне правительства мы создали межведомственную комиссию по внедрению конвенций МОД вот как раз-таки в жизнь Узбекистана. На уровне парламента у нас создана парламентская комиссия по совершенствованию законодательства вообще в сфере социально-трудовых вопросов. Вот эти три крупных института, они постоянно общаются между собой. Их рекомендации являются обязательными для рассмотрения правительством нашей страны. И за последние 2 года вот как раз-таки на основе этих рекомендаций этих органов принято 9 постановлений, указов президента, постановлений правительства, которые предусматривают совершенствование системы сельского хозяйства в Узбекистане до 2030 года. То есть разработана стратегия развития сельского хозяйства вот как раз-таки на основе наших рекомендаций. Что предусматривает эта стратегия? Это в первую очередь модернизацию сельского хозяйства, внедрение рыночных механизмов. Второе – это усовершенствование эффективной системы цепочки поставок. То есть не все работодатели, особенно которые не являются в системе правительства, они хотят выполнять стандарты в сфере труда. Поэтому вот как раз-таки внедрение эффективной системы в цепочке поставок это является главным вопросом. Следующее – повышение закупочных цен на хлопок, увеличение в сотни раз заработной платы временных работников. Следующее – это создание достойных условий труда для временных работников. И самое главное – эффективная система, внедрена образовательная система для детей, вот как раз-таки начиная с дошкольной системы, заканчивая высшим образованием. То есть вот это комплекс мероприятий, который является как бы предложениями социальных партнеров, позволяет решить проблему. И на сегодняшний день в Узбекистане не только ликвидирован, вообще он стал социально неприемлемым детский труд. Он также предупреждает даже риски внедрения детского труда. Вот это является самым главным вопросом, поэтому я хотела бы здесь ко всем коллегам обратиться и попросить. Вы должны наладить хороший социальный диалог между всеми сторонами. Тогда у вас все получится. А на помощь придет Международная организация труда. Спасибо.
Thank you very much for that roadway, that path that you've laid out. And it was actually, Jacqueline, the question that I left with you, the change of the mindset, which seems, apart from the laws that we need, one of the most important things, because once you're convinced of the right action, you can actually do it.
I think mindsets have changed over time. We started the IFIC program actually with Dr. Bekele in a meeting which was held in Ethiopia and in Kenya, Tanzania, and a number of countries, 5 countries, started talking about child labor. Nobody had talked about child labor until then. We've seen laws passed. We've seen companies addressing child labor in agriculture for the formal sector. We've seen the age that a child can enter into work determined by many African countries. There's legislation that has happened. So this is an ongoing thing. A lot has changed in that. But I think the complexity about child labor, and listening to Molly's story, is that there is no single answer, there is no simple answer to child labor. Its prevalence is strongly linked to family and community poverty, which in turn is perpetuated by the same things. So the response must be based on policies which promote social and economic development, effective regulation, and also addressing minimum age and the right to education. Decent work for adults, because it is adults who pull children to work in tea plantations. This happens in Kenya as well. And I grew up in the tea plantations, by the way, Molly. And young workers, what is the legal age for working children? So I think my last point is really to address this issue, we have to address the root causes and the systemic issues that Molly talked about. These are poverty, these are informality, and the lack of educational opportunities for young people. It has to be a multifaceted approach, because if you remove a child from work, you tell a parent, stop your child from going to work, to pick tea, what alternative are you giving those parents? So for instance, in Kenya, we've introduced the Adopt a School program that addresses the poverty issues within the community, allows families to have a cow, for instance, that can produce milk, feed the children, so that they have food and they can go to class, maybe up to 1, and work under supervision in the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for sharing. And that gives me a great tie over to Ms. Martins-Batista, because you were actually saying that the family situation, single mothers having to bring their children into work because otherwise they can't make ends meet, that is one aspect. Where are other aspects that you see ways, pathways to accelerate, i.e. to get the numbers down quickly?
Oi. Olá. ¿Está ligado? Eu vou falar uma frase famosa, que creio que esta frase pueda dizer exatamente que penso que seja, se as pessoas pensarem que esta frase dita há quase 500 anos atrás, por escritor chamado Thomas Hobbes, que escreveu livro chamado Leviatã. Se compreendermos esta frase, poderemos resolver quase todos os problemas da humanidade. O homem, el hombre, é o lobo del hombre. Isto quer dizer o seguinte: quando homem hace o lobo de outro homem, significa que vamos continuar tendo crianças, niñas, trabalhando, temos pessoas explotadas trabalhando em minas, em trabalhos peligrosos, trabalhos escravos, trabalhos forçosos. Quando compreendermos que temos que compartilhar a riqueza deste planeta para todos e todas, aí não haremos uma festa e não vamos mais chorar quando ouvir mole. É só isso que queria dizer. Graças.
Thank you very much, and also thank you very much to being short. So could I entice, and of course it's always the others then that have to be a bit shorter. Sue, your takeaway was it's still a lot of work, especially because we're dealing with smaller structures. If you were to leave us with the one idea where we can find a pathway to acceleration, where would that be?
I think for me, and I think there's a consensus that we need to address root causes in a number of ways, by mobilization at village level and all of these sort of things. But for me, the key question, the key accelerator will be addressing this fundamental power imbalance in rural areas. I mean, we really still do have feudal landlords and slavery. And as a trade union, again, I come back to this point, both for small farmers and agricultural workers, it's about giving them the tools to address the power imbalance so that they can negotiate fair prices for their crops, they can negotiate decent work and conditions. And it's putting all of this together. It's policies that don't address child labor in isolation, but that give a real voice to rural communities to address them. I mean, we heard the reference to social dialogue, and I would remind, I shouldn't have to, but I would remind this House that social dialogue in ILO terms means freedom of association and the right to bargain. And for us, that's the accelerator, having the voice, having the power to drive that change.
Thank you very much. We're going to keep our sleeves up and working at it. Phyllis, companies, of course, these days, and there's been a big mindset change, are made responsible for what they do, and they're also made responsible, and they are responsible for the supply chains. Now, you've shown us a couple of examples where things work, but at the moment in one country and a couple of projects where you've actually put in a lot of work. How can you accelerate that? How can you take that to scale so that more children profit?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So one thing is test what's work, what doesn't work, and if that works, extend what works. So it's about extension. And secondly, it's about adapting the local context. And we need to find a local solution, work with local partners, local NGOs. That has to be extended also from one country to another countries, sharing best practices. And the third thing is also of business interest to demand for stronger social policy of protecting children, as well as the enforcement of labor law. And I think lastly, what we can do to accelerate is to empower young people, to include them to find a common solution together.
Lovely. Molly, what would we wish for all those children that you're working with? What would you wish all of us here to do?
I agree with everybody else that we have to look at the mindset of the people.
Molly's microphone?
I agree with everybody else that we have to work on changing the mindset of people. But in Africa, where I live, we have to make sure that the community structures work. Because before the president sees that child laborer, there are community structures down there who should be able to see and take on this as their responsibility. I also believe that we need to empower the children to be more resilient. Because so many children are out there and all they need to hear is that amidst all the challenges, there is still an opportunity. And it takes that resilient, that empowered eye to see that opportunity. So we need to empower the children more and more to ensure that they see these opportunities. Of course, it also takes on a multi-stakeholder approach. The private sector, the government, the civil society, the community itself, and everybody to ensure that we see change at the policy level, at the gender community level, and at a practice level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Mr. Bekwele, looking into the future, looking at those next 6 years that we have as a world community set and committed to getting to zero, which I think, we need goals. Where would you say can we turn the screw easiest?
You know, for example, the points that have made by Sue, about the Kenyan concern in terms of a comprehensive approach, all these are very important. But what we must recognize is that the problem is not lack of knowing what to do or how to do it. The elephant in the room is what to do about the states. With the Convention on the Rights of the Child, with the ILO conventions, the major duty bearer is the state. What the state does or doesn't do makes a huge difference in the lives of children. Our African governments, for example, they're quite good when it comes to rhetoric. They've ratified the major human treaties, conventions, and so on. The problem is making them happen. If we therefore really want to make a difference, what we need to do is to ensure that we hold our governments accountable. So the big question for all of us, because we're not going to get to the answers here, but the big question to all of us is, what is it that needs to be done to initiate, catalyze, and sustain the kind of politics we need that would narrow the gap between rhetoric and action, and that would put children at the heart of public policy? That is the big question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we leave you more or less with a question. I heard the word relentless as a sort of underlying aspect, and we need to have acceleration. I think that has become clear. Thank you very much for sharing your viewpoint, where you come from, and what we need to do from your perspective. I think I don't need to summarize that, and I'm not quite sure, Mr. Naidu, whether some of your questions were answered now. But to me, I was very, very happy with what I've heard, and I know that we need to continue in our strength of working against child labor everywhere on the globe. With an applause, thank you very much. There's never enough time when you talk about issues that are really coming from the heart. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, after we have the lectern here, and everybody sort of finds their spaces, I would like to invite our next speaker. Oh, yes, there it is. Okay, sorry, I was just trying to make sure that our next speaker can actually speak. And I see that the provisions are being made. So we've heard our Indian minister earlier with a statement. One of the countries that is the last ones in line to ratify the Convention 182 was Eritrea, and we have the Director General of Labour and Human Welfare here with us, Mr. Jesus Gulai. So nice that you can be with us, and so nice that you can share your government's conviction why you ratified the convention. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ILO Director General Mr. Guy Ryder, ministers present, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a pleasure to present the government of the state of Eritrea and join the international community to celebrate the 219th World Day Against Child Labor. Eritrea appreciates and acknowledges the ILO for bringing up the issue of child labor at the time when we are celebrating the ILO Centenary. In our 100 years journey, we come to know the major causes and the consequences and the complexity of child labor. Thus, there is a need to get together and stand firm against child labor to take irreversible action. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just shortly go through in what Eritrea is doing in regard with child labor. In Eritrea, all the good things for children is the belief of Eritrean society, which is confirmed by the cultural practice and norms of the society. Therefore, Eritrea's nation building is building a youth with emphasis on capacity building and skills development for smooth transitioning from school to work. To combat child labor and its worst forms, different programs and projects are being launched in Eritrea. Doing things according to our own rhythm and in accordance with our own needs and available resources, managed to achieve sound achievements. Moreover, Eritrea is happy to join the global movement to fight child labor together. For social justice is at the core of our struggle as a state. Therefore, the very first step of ensuring our togetherness around this noble idea is to ratify the conventions that guide us to eliminate child labor. Ladies and gentlemen, Eritrea's commitment to and utmost priority for the protection of children was evidenced when the first conventions to be ratified by Eritrea after independence was indeed the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1994, followed by Minimum Age Convention number 138 in 2000. Through extensive and varied tripartite social dialogues and consultations, Eritrea stands here today at this momentous juncture with this august body, having ratified the last of the 8 fundamental ILO conventions, the worst forms of child labor convention number 182. Eritrea not only remains dedicated, it also endeavors to work closely with the ILO on combating on broader technical cooperation issues, including the development of a decent work country program. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Eritrea stands in action with you, ILO, and the world community in this noble idea of having a brighter future without child labor and to advance social justice. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gulain, also for being here in person. And the reason I'm saying that is because the next person who is going to extend her greetings cannot be with us here today. However, she has taped a video message for us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to listen to the words of Ms. Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, and the video starts now.
My warm greetings to ILO Director General Guy Ryder, to the delegates of the International Labour Conference, and to the many partners and young people coming together today. As you know, 152 million children worldwide are in child labour and denied their basic human rights. World Day Against Child Labour is a critical moment to renew our resolve to end this plight. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development provides a roadmap and a global promise to ensure that no child is left behind. In particular, Target 8.7 calls for an end to child labour in all its forms by 2025. This year, we proudly mark not only the centenary of the ILO, but also our 100-year battle against child labour. In 1919, the ILO adopted the first international labour standard on child labour, which was also the first international standard on children's rights. Since then, our world has made much progress. Today, the 2 fundamental conventions on child labour are almost universally accepted as human and labour rights. These standards are supported by Article 32 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. We know what works: universal, quality, free education, social protection for all, decent work for adults and youth of legal working age. We also know where the key challenges remain, particularly in the rural and informal economies, where the vast majority of child labour is still found today, but also in global and domestic supply chains and in affected areas by conflict and disasters. The good news is that there are almost 100 million fewer children in child labour today than in the year 2000. Yet despite this progress, we must move faster and further to reach the 2025 goal. Together, let us pledge to work in solidarity to accelerate and scale up action, and let us resolve to finally end child labour in all its forms by 2025. Thank you for your commitment, your passion to moving our world forward and leaving no one behind.
So thank you very much, Mrs. Mohammed. If she's in New York, she's probably just waking up to our applause. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the UN system is wide and many-faceted, and sometimes different organizations work for the same goal, and that is the case in the case of child labor. So we're very happy to have here a representative from UNICEF. And on the way to introducing Nina Ferencik, I would just like to quote the one thing that I found on the UNICEF homepage, and that was posted many times yesterday on Twitter. It's the saying, children should be building sandcastles not bricks. I think that says a lot, and with that I would like you to stay where you are and make your statement from the floor. Nina Frencic, she's the Senior Regional Advisor on Adolescent Health, Development, Participation and HIV/AIDS. And you didn't have to come far, you are based in Geneva. Thank you for having come here today. Should be working if you press it hard enough. Okay. If not, let me give you the one microphone. Okay? Yeah. Quick fix here.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Quick fixes always are good. So thank you very much for the invitation. I think that clearly thank you for the excellent debate and speakers today. UNICEF, of course, congratulates today's World Day Against Child Labor and the 20th anniversary of the ILO Convention 182. And we have been a long-term partner of ILO and of the governments working on these issues at the global level. We are working on the 2030 agenda as joint guardians of the SDG 8.7 goal. And so there is a lot of things on which we work together, as you said. So let me focus quickly on 3 points. First, data. Data is clearly fundamental because we need to understand and capture the progress and the bottlenecks and the risks that are in the fight against child labor, because that gives us the basis. And UNICEF and ILO work in concert to capture data which underpins the policy and the legal change that's fundamental to success. In 2017, the global estimates of child labor, which indicated that almost 1 in 10 of all children worldwide are in child labor, drew substantively from the UNICEF mixed data, which is the multiple indicator cluster surveys. And UNICEF and ILO have already agreed that to further enhance the work on measurements related to child labor and include aspects like household chores, economic work, making girls' work more visible in particular, and revealing some of the compounding vulnerabilities that come along with that result from such hidden forms of child labor, including things like reduced access to education, decent work, and child marriage. Second point, action. As many speakers have said today, child labor is both a cause and a consequence of poverty, reinforcing social inequity, discrimination, and it cannot be addressed by simply a simplistic solution. It requires an integrated, multidimensional approach. And there's no single silver bullet. So UNICEF and ILO agree that specific key policy and legislative interventions are needed, including quality education for all, inclusive social protection system, which include health, including in situations of emergencies. Then we need the translation of international conventions into local legislation and local action, and the prioritization of decent work for adults. Now, UNICEF, of course, in addition to that, what we work on a lot is the issues of strengthening some other aspects like parenting, and working on changing social norms that make child labor, to make it unacceptable in the community. We are also working on aspects like strengthening the social welfare workforces that are preventing and responding and removing children from child labor situations. And we are also working on civil registration for establishing when children are too young to work. That's important. And the third point is partnerships. UNICEF fully supports today's slogan, children shouldn't work in the fields, but on their dreams. And yes, on building sandcastles, as you said. But for far too many children, the reality is more of a nightmare. And nearly a quarter of the world's child population, an estimated 535 million children, live in countries affected by conflict, natural disaster, epidemics, or other emergencies. And this is, of course, changing the patterns of child labor as well. So, including the specific targeting of children by non-state armed groups. So, maintaining the current rate of progress would leave 121 million children still engaged in child labor in 2025. So our challenge today remains significant, and new momentum and partnerships are needed if children's capacities and dreams are to be fulfilled. And let me state an important point from our point of view. It is, as we saw, we will build those partnerships. As we build them, it is really essential to include and hear the voices of children and adolescents who are personally affected by child labor situations, because they are not only able to talk about the reality, as Molly did today, but they are also the co-creators of solutions. They are the source of solutions for addressing the issues, and they can co-create together with experts and international partners and local communities to help address and change the situation. So to end, to say thank you, UNICEF continues to stand together with ILO and all the partners to address these challenges and achieving the ambitious but equally urgent global targets. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nina, and thank you very much, UNICEF. And with that, I'd like to invite, that's so funny, I've never introduced you as a colleague, now as a moderator colleague, Beate Andres, who actually has a first job. She's the Chief of Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work branch here at the ILO. You take over from here, and can I just give you a sneak preview? Up there, when you see those red T-shirts, everybody up there is very nervous because they're going to be singing to us later on. But first of all, Beate and her wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie, for stealing my introduction, but
Oh,
no
sorry.
problem.
We didn't talk about that. You know, communication is so important, isn't it?
But I wanted to first acknowledge the presence of the president of the Centenary Conference, who is able to join us now, Mr. Jean-Jacques Emiger. It is a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making time available. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us for a very special part of today's event. And it is really a distinct pleasure of mine to acknowledge, to welcome, and to thank the ILO's partners of SCREAM. I think if you've listened to Molly, you now know what SCREAM is. But I say it again, it's the ILO's program to support children through education, the arts and media. And a particular module of SCREAM involves music. And today we will launch this music module together with our partners of the initiative, the World Initiative Against Music Against Child Labor. So let me call our speakers to the stage here. They will give you very short statements from their perspective why education, arts and media is so important to empower children. As we just heard from Molly, as we heard from UNICEF, and I think as you will all agree. So we have Mrs. Lina Alvarado Rinano from Colombia, a youth advocate of SCREAM. We have Mrs. Marah Khalili from Jordan. Please give them a round of applause. Mr. Benoit Mahuel, he is the General Secretary of the International Federation of Musicians. Please come to the stage. Mr. Anand Singh from Education International, he is the Chief Regional Coordinator of the Asia Pacific. Thank you, Anand. And last but not least, Mr. Blasko Smilewski, the Executive Director of Jeunesse Musicale Internationale. Please, Blasko. So let me start with Lina. Mic is on. Lina, you are a national youth leader for the 100 million for 100 million campaign. A campaign launched by our friend Kailash Satyarthi, who, as we heard, was here many times. And can you tell us what motivated you to join this campaign? And what I heard yesterday from you, that you're also you also broke already a Guinness World Record, if that's correct. Can you tell us what you did? You didn't, there was no translation? Oh, okay. It doesn't work? Let me just help you this here. Doesn't work. You don't hear the translation? No? Oh, it's not in Espanol? Okay.
Ya.
Di la campaña. Sí, chente.
Sí, ya. ¿Aló?
Yes.
Ok. Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por esta invitación. Quiero compartirles que en Colombia estamos trabajando desde diferentes maneras. Nosotros los jóvenes estamos llamados con ímpetu a accionar con toda esta alegría y con toda esta potencialidad que tenemos nosotros. Yo les cuento que 100 millones para 100 millones es una campaña que estamos liderando, es una campaña que proviene de la Marcha Global contra el Trabajo Infantil y lo que queremos es 3 cosas súper esenciales. La primera es trabajar con los jóvenes, la segunda es cambiar actitudes y la tercera es trabajar con los tomadores de decisiones. Eso es 100 millones para 100 millones.
Muchas gracias.
A ti.
Nina, now let us turn to Marah. And you just told me this morning that your name means fun. Yeah. So tell us about fun stuff, but also serious stuff, because I think the Children's Podium in Jordan is a very important example of empowering children. Please.
I'm very happy to be here right now to represent what the youth does for the move against child labor. At first, I want to say how I got in the fight against child labor. In 2015, I got elected to participate in Greater Amman Municipality initiative, which was called Children Municipal Council. This helps children to be involved in the designing and implementing of programs for child protection and development. So we started with a survey. This survey was carried in Amman, in the places where child labor is prominent. This survey was followed then by a workshop for 5 days in cooperation with the ILO to, in the end, have 2 main campaigns to fight against child labor. The first one was called We Want to Stay Here, here referring to school. And the second one was called My Story, أو قصتي أنا. My Story and We Want to Stay Here are campaigns to help us, the youth, to advocate against this unjust problem of child labor. I want to tell you more about the campaigns. The first one is called We Want to Stay Here. It was about, like my friend Molly said before me, about preventing children from leaving school. Dropping off was, regarding the statistics we found from the survey, dropping off of school was the first step of getting involved in child labor. So we started to prevent, we wanted to prevent dropping off. So we made brochures and pens and T-shirts, and we went to different schools to raise awareness about how education can lead to a better future. The second one was My Story. My Story is about a puppet show that was carried out in public places like parks, like malls, so we can reach more people. It was about a child who got involved in child labor because of his friend. This puppet show shows the importance of being involved in a child life, whether it was the school or the parents. So My Story was all about a child who was involved in child labor and how bad it was for him, and the circumstances that he was put in how it did affect him. So whether it was mentally or physically. And then we followed it, in conclusion, we followed it with a conference, a national forum called Be Their Voice. So we can, the youth, be the voices of the voiceless. Yes.
This is a really great sentence to leave us with, and I think it really shows as an example how Scream empowers young people. Anand, Education International has been a long-standing partner of the ILO, and next month actually you're having your global conference, your congress in Bangkok. So can you tell us from Education International's perspective, what is the role of teachers? What is your view on including arts and music in the education programs?
Thank you, Beat. Hello. First of all, let me thank you and everyone else here for this opportunity to commemorate World Against Child Labor here with you all. And we strongly believe that quality inclusive public education is key to eradicating child labor. As Education Union representing around 32 million teachers in 175 countries, we have been working with our affiliates to tackle child labor through advocacy to improve quality public education and by supporting professional development of teachers across the globe. So that the schools are better placed to attract and retain children, as well as also to fight against child labor, particularly in those countries where there are high incidences of child labor. We are currently supporting projects against child labor in 10 countries, in 3 continents, including my own country, India. Through an area-based approach, the education unions work in selected schools, target areas, and try to bring child labor into education and reduce absenteeism and dropout. As a result of such initiative, in Mali, we have been able to bring around 1,000 children to the schools. In doing so, what we do is the education unions foster relationships, foster partnerships with education authorities and civil societies, and promote social dialogue at local and national level with the aim of improving investment in schools and the overall quality of education, provisioning, and teaching. Programs also include professional development for teachers, which aim to strengthen their knowledge about ILO conventions, national legislations on minimum age of work, and also on Convention of Child Rights. And also on child-centered pedagogy and active learning. We believe that making schools an attractive environment conducive to learning is key in fighting against child labor. There is also, thanks to SCREAM modules, emphasis on music, drama, and other cultural activities together with sports. Teachers who are working on these projects have found these activities as among most effective ways to improve school attendance as well as retention, and also offering opportunities for learning and socializing and building skills and self-esteem. A recent study conducted by EI in 5 countries where we have child labor projects have found that music and other cultural activities are one of the important methods to attract and retain students, and also a way of creating awareness about child labor in schools and within the community. Music and musical drama are also effective tools for students to spread the message about child labor and empower them to become agents of change. In some countries, these subjects have been incorporated into the main school curriculum. In others, they are offered outside this academic curriculum. They also provide an opportunity to celebrate and reform cultural diversity, cultural traditions, and ethnic diversity in an inclusive environment. To give you some examples from our project countries, like in Uganda, teachers organize a weekly march with the students and children and teaching staff around the local markets, going to different directions every week, and the children sing songs about the dangers of child labor and also of the importance of going to the schools. They dance to the drums, calling upon the children who are working in the markets to come and join them. And head teachers have reported that there has been a large increase in the enrollments because of these initiatives. Similarly, in Nicaragua and in Zimbabwe, we have these programs where we use music and dance to propagate the message and also propagate the message of child labor. So for these reasons, EI is very proud to be here today to celebrate together with ILO, musicians from the JM International and International Federation of Musicians, and you all, the launch of SCREAM module on music. The modules will act as an important tool and is full of practical, insightful advice to the educators and the music makers. We believe these can be easily incorporated into EI's ongoing programs and joint initiatives, and with other partners to eradicate child labor and support quality inclusive education for all. Above all, modules chime perfectly with EI's child-centric approach to learning and importance of encouraging the involvement of parents and wider community. We look forward to putting the SCREAM modules into use and congratulate all those who are concerned with this inspiring initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anand, really for your continued support. Glasgow, Jeunesse Musicale takes a similar position as Education International. I think we know this, the importance of arts and media. What are your examples to share with us today?
Well, Jeunesse Musicale International, Youth Music International, was created in 1945 in Brussels. So it all started in 1940 as a response to the then occupation of Belgium, and with the intention of never repeating this again, by promoting peace among children and young people. Now, today, we stand to develop or to empower young people to develop across all boundaries through music, or to make a difference in their life, in short. We are present in 70 countries across the world, 40,000 activities globally every year, and outreach to around 8 million children and young people. So there are many examples that I can give about empowerment and integration of children and youth at risk, especially. I'm just going to pinpoint 2 or 3, and it's about programs with minors in prisons, for example, in Venezuela, in Turkey, or in Malawi, where we work in instrument teaching or choirs, orchestras, in order to re-socialize young people and prepare them back for the society. Or young Roma children in what is now known as North Macedonia, where they are attracted to local youth centers, taking them away from being forced to sell food or make food on the fields for their families, or being out of school, begging on the streets, attracted through music to the community centers, and then slowly introduced to computer language courses, livelihood skills, going back to schools, and so on. Or an example of a young girl from Zambia who was a victim of the local sex industry as a minor for several years, who then became involved in our music programs, formed a band, who won our interregional South African competition, then toured Europe, and today is a very prominent musician. And these are just few examples. What I can draw as a conclusion of all our programs and activities is that participation, as someone already said, that these children and young people are not just our targets and beneficiaries, they are actually active co-creators of the solutions and everything that we are doing. Number 2 is cross-sectoral cooperation. Music is very important, but it will not do the job alone, so we have to work together, all of us. The commitment of the stakeholders, because that's important, and investment. That's the last. A country of 10 million people needs $1 billion in curative measures. This is a calculation done some 10 years ago by the monitoring and evaluation departments in the World Bank, where I used to work before. But it only needs 100 million in preventive measures. So this kind of gives us the road to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Blasco, and really thank you for these wonderful examples. And last but not least, Benoit, you are a musician yourself, as well as a trade unionist. And when we ask you whether you would consider partnering with us in the development of this module, you immediately said yes, and I thank you for this. Can you tell us what drove you into this program? What makes it? Where does it make the difference for you?
Merci Beate. Et merci à IPEC et à toutes les personnes qui sont engagées quotidiennement dans ce travail pour éradiquer le travail des enfants. Et bravo au travail qui a été effectué par toute l'équipe de Scream. Effectivement, ma fédération est une fédération syndicale avec des membres dans environ 70 pays. Donc, en quelque sorte, je me sens un peu chez moi ici à l'occasion de la conférence internationale du travail. Je suis effectivement un musicien, ça a été les 20 premières années de ma carrière. Et j'ai enchaîné avec un travail en tant que représentant international dans le mouvement syndical. La musique, je ne vais pas vous décrire ce qu'est la musique, mais enfin la musique a un caractère universel en tant que source d'émotion. C'est un champ d'expression de la créativité humaine, elle est porteuse aussi d'identité culturelle. Le mouvement syndical, lui, repose sur des valeurs de respect de la personne, des valeurs d'équité, de justice sociale. Donc, lorsque l'initiative qui a été prise de faire entrer le champ musical dans la lutte contre le travail des enfants, lorsque cette initiative a vu le jour et que mon ami que je vois ici, Simon Stein, a pris son bâton de pèlerin pour jouer son rôle d'avocat auprès du secteur musical, comment imaginer que nous ne soyons pas immédiatement partenaires de cette initiative? Nous sommes sentis bien sûr complètement concernés. Donc nous avons contribué, j'allais dire avec modestie, parce que après avoir entendu les témoignages de la première partie de la matinée, ce à quoi nous pouvons contribuer, nous, en tant que fédération syndicale, c'est essentiellement aider à la prise de conscience. Donc c'est ce que nous avons fait avec plusieurs initiatives dans tous les secteurs tous les genres musicaux, avec des concerts qui ont été dédiés à cette cause. La page d'accueil du programme SCREAM, je trouve, est très belle. Elle dit « Chaque enfant a le droit de jouer, d'aller à l'école et de rêver. Chaque adulte porte la responsabilité en tant que gardien de l'enfance de rendre cela possible. » Effectivement, il nous appartient à tous de préserver l'enfance. L'enfance qui est un moment d'innocence. Il faut permettre aux enfants de pouvoir continuer à porter ce regard émerveillé sur le monde, quelquefois au prix de leur masquer ce qui dans le monde n'est pas aussi beau que ce qu'on imagine dans l'enfance. Encore quelques mots sur l'importance de la musique dans la formation de l'homme et de la personne humaine. On sait aujourd'hui, la science nous apprend à quel point la pratique musicale a une influence sur le développement du cerveau. Lorsqu'on regarde l'imagerie médicale, en cas d'écoute passive de la musique, on voit à quel point le cerveau bouillonne. Mais lorsqu'on observe cette même imagerie médicale alors qu'on a affaire à une pratique musicale active, là, c'est un feu d'artifice à l'intérieur du cerveau. Et on sait aussi que lorsque ces initiatives de pratique musicale sont prises tôt dans l'enfance, c'est-à-dire à partir de l'âge de 7 ans, par exemple, ça a un impact immédiat, mais aussi durable. Ça a un effet sur la perception de l'espace, sur la sociabilisation, sur la maîtrise du langage. Donc, maintenant, après coup, ça peut paraître aussi simple de dire ben oui, bien sûr, c'est évident d'associer la musique à ce travail, mais je crois qu'il faut rendre hommage à tous ceux qui ont eu cette idée et qui l'ont mise en œuvre, d'utiliser tout le potentiel de la musique dans toutes ses dimensions pour aider les enfants à rester intégrés dans le lien social, pas seulement pour le développement personnel, mais aussi pour le développement de l'inclusion sociale au sein de ces populations. Et un dernier mot pour évoquer ce qui reste pour nous comme une référence, qui était ce qu'on a appelé El Sistema au Venezuela, avec le travail du docteur Abreu, pour réaliser véritablement l'inclusion sociale des plus pauvres grâce à la musique. Merci.
Merci Benoît. Encore une fois, applause. C'est le vrai musicien qui a parlé. Merci pour votre soutien. Thank you very much again to all the panelists, and please stay with us for a few more minutes. As you can see, the children are still there and will give us a little show shortly. So again, thank you to all of you for your support of the SCREAM module on music. I hand over now to you, Connie, please.
This morning, and hi guys, 8.7, and we all know that the initiative, the Alliance 8.7, has been in existence now for, well, 2.5 years. Of course, 8.7 being part of the SDGs, one under goal, so to say, and it pleases me very much to know that in this age where multilateralism seems to be on the way out, or being pushed on the way out, that there are still alliances together. And this alliance is with governments, trade union leaders, business executives, civil society, faith-bound organizations, academia. They all go together in order to try and eradicate forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking, and of course, child labor. And so we are very happy, ladies and gentlemen, to have here the new chair of the Alliance 8.7. And I must say, this lady is not only brave, but she also sort of put together her teeth and said, nothing is going to stop me from saying hello, I'm here, despite some stumbling blocks in the true sense of the word. We have her here, Anousheh Carval. She's a delegate of the government of France to the ILO governing body. She is the new chair of the Alliance 8.7 and a member of the Ministry of Labour, Family and Look at that. Look at that. What a brave woman. And if you need assistance, I'm here for you. I can. Okay. So could you please give her a big hand, not just because she's here, but because she's here.
Monsieur le Président de la Conférence internationale du travail du centenaire, Monsieur le Directeur général de l'OIT, Monsieur le Directeur général délégué de l'OIT, Mesdames et Messieurs, je m'excuse de me présenter devant vous un peu cabossée. J'ai eu un accident de travail au Palais des Nations, mais rien de grave et surtout rien qui ne puisse m'empêcher de venir vous saluer et de vous dire ma fierté, mais aussi mon humilité face au travail que vous réalisez, face au travail conséquent réalisé par la présidence australienne et la vice-présidence argentine jusqu'à présent, le secrétariat de l'OIT, son travail sans relâche pour ce qui nous réunit ici, c'est-à-dire atteindre les objectifs de développement durable. Et nous avons une obligation de résultat avec un horizon temporel très précis, 2030, pour éradiquer le travail forcé, mettre fin à l'esclavage moderne et à la traite des personnes, éliminer et interdire toutes les formes de travail des enfants. Car, mesdames et messieurs, nous devons rendre aux enfants leur innocence et rendre notre dignité à la communauté humaine, car en leur faisant prendre le chemin de l'école, ce n'est pas seulement leur avenir que nous assurons, mais aussi notre avenir et notre dignité à pouvoir leur assurer leur avenir. Permettez-moi aussi de dire à quel point cette plateforme de l'Alliance 8.7, qui réunit les gouvernements, les agences onusiennes et au-delà les agences internationales, avec les organisations syndicales et patronales, avec la société civile et les entreprises, partager des informations, partager les pratiques prometteuses, les leçons et surtout, mesurer en permanence les progrès accomplis. Je voudrais ici aussi rendre hommage aux pays pionniers, les 15 pays pionniers dont nous essaierons dans tout notre possible d'élargir le champ sur le travail conséquent et concret qu'ils réalisent sur le terrain. Et je voudrais aussi ici rappeler l'engagement de mon président de la République pour l'Alliance du Sahel, pour l'Afrique, pour que sur tous les continents, nous puissions éradiquer le travail des enfants. Dernier point, je voudrais dire que les 4 directions dans lesquelles nous engageons nos forces, que ce soit le travail avec l'immigration, avec l'état de droit et la gouvernance, avec les conflits et les situations humanitaires, mais surtout et aussi l'éradication du travail des enfants dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement globales est l'engagement que nous prenons pour l'avenir. Et comme vous le savez, grâce à une initiative du Premier ministre suédois Stefan Löfven, repris par l'OIT et l'OCDE, nous avons monté une plateforme appelée Global Deal qui est consacrée au développement du dialogue social transnational pour éradiquer toutes les formes de travail forcé et du travail des enfants sur toutes les chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales, mais au-delà d'implanter les normes internationales du travail dans toutes nos démarches. Et c'est cette démarche de cohérence, de coordination et de travail en commun que nous voudrions au niveau multilatéral lancer avec les organisations internationales qui sont impliquées dans ce travail, mais aussi avec les entreprises multinationales. Permettez-moi aussi de dire que j'attends avec beaucoup d'impatience le moment important pour l'Alliance 8.7 de donner de la visibilité et de l'accélération dans ces travaux que se trouve à New York le 17 juillet dans le cadre du forum politique de haut niveau de l'ECOSOC de l'ONU, le HLPF. Et à cette occasion, nous voudrions donner beaucoup plus de lumière et beaucoup plus d'impétus au travail que nous allons réaliser ensemble. Je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre attention et vous pouvez compter sur mon engagement sans faille. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Makava, and it's wonderful that you are here, that you're standing on your own two legs in front of us. And good luck, and keep up the good energy and the positive energy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of little people who are tiny bit nervous, but I'm not going to exaggerate on that. They are all children from La Découverte School here in Geneva. Thank you very much for being with us. And, you know, we heard earlier off stream how important it is to have music, to have arts in education, and to also think of others. And as we are filling up, so we have the first row. Bonjour. I think you're going to be a bit louder when you're going to be singing. So we have... Those 6 will speak. Okay, in that case, I don't have all the names. I only have a couple of the names. In that case, I'm not going to mention one name. I'm just going to say you are the front runners. You're wonderful because these kids have prepared statements that they would like to share with us. The music that you're going to be hearing later on, they have already prepared for something that happened a bit earlier here in Geneva. And they were actually raising money for a school in Mexico to actually have music education. So all of these children that you will see up on stage are heroes, and I think we have very special heroes that are going to start. Do we have the microphone? Because I think without the microphone it's going to be rather difficult. I'm not quite sure which number that is, but you can identify it? Great. Okay, who of you is going to start? You are. And you are Inaya. Inaya, would you please start?
Je suis l'enfant qui travaille. Je suis un enfant, pas un esclave. Je suis un enfant censé m'amuser, apprendre et grandir. Vous devez agir. Tous les enfants doivent avoir une vie, mais
You're doing really well. That's okay. It's fantastic. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's all okay.
You want to continue or do you want to continue? It's up to you.
Okay, one.
Yeah, do you want to... Yeah? You don't have to continue if you want. You can come with me. It's up to you. Do you want to continue? Yeah? You sure? Okay. Do you want me
Okay.
to stand next to you?
Thank you very much, Inaya, for making that great kickoff. It's okay. One breathe in. Hey, look at me, look at me. And okay.
tous les enfants doivent avoir une vie, mais moi je n'en ai pas. Je ne suis pas payée. Je me fais mal partout. Des fois, je me fais frapper. Ce que je fais est dangereux pour ma santé, mais tout ce qu'on fabrique est pour vous. Nous n'allons pas à l'école comme vos enfants. C'est pire que de mourir, car ma vie, c'est souffrir. Parfois, je préférerais mourir que continuer à vivre.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And now the next in line.
Ce n'est pas parce que tu es pauvre que ta vie n'a pas de valeur. Les enfants ont le droit d'être libres, vivre avec leur famille, de sourire, rigoler et avoir de la joie. L'enfance est magique, mais ce n'est pas le cas pour tous les enfants. Un enfant est une fleur riche en couleurs et fragile en même temps. Nous sommes des enfants et nous sommes la paix. Les enfants qui travaillent devraient pouvoir vivre et grandir comme nous.
J'aimerais que tous ces 152 millions d'enfants puissent être libres. ILO travaille pour que tout le monde soit mieux protégé, comme nous le sommes. Nous avons de la chance d'être des enfants, parce que l'enfance c'est joyeux et c'est plein d'imagination. Dans certains pays, les enfants n'ont pas le droit d'exprimer ce qu'ils imaginent. Je suis là pour que tous les enfants aillent à l'école et qu'ils sachent écrire des histoires. Je suis venue ici pour chanter des chansons et pour dire que c'est injuste que les enfants n'aient pas cette chance d'aller à l'école et que moi j'ai cette chance. J'aimerais bien que tous les enfants aient la même chance que moi. On est tous des enfants, on en a tous été un. Pourquoi n'avons-nous pas tous la même chance? Je voudrais qu'on construise des écoles dans chaque pays et que ces écoles soient toutes publiques pour que tous les enfants puissent être éduqués. Je voudrais que chaque enfant ait la liberté d'avoir une enfance comme la mienne. Aller à l'école et apprendre à conjuguer le verbe rire au présent, jouer à cache-cache avec ses amis, bien manger des bonnes choses comme des nouilles et des bonbons, boire de l'eau potable, écrire des textes sur ses merveilleuses vacances d'été, s'exprimer, dire son opinion, lire des livres qui le font rire, savoir diviser 196 par 3 et marquer des buts puis les célébrer en dansant. Ensemble, nous sommes forts pour changer toutes ces choses et que tous les enfants soient heureux. Je suis ici aujourd'hui pour partager cela et espérer que le message soit passé.
As children of La Découverte are honored to help children in difficult situations. We are very lucky to have what we have, and all children should be respected like us. They should have the same right as us. All the children should have the right to say what they think about child labor. That's the reason we're saying today at the World Day Against Child Labor.
Well done.
This year, these 3 classes from La Découverte participated in a don du cœur with lots more children from schools in Geneva. In total, we raised 100,000 Swiss francs for the Santa Cecilia Music School in Oaxaca, Mexico. The money will allow the construction of 3 large rehearsal rooms and 10 individual practice rooms.
We hope that this will help more children in difficult situations increase musical education and have a positive impact on their life. Today we have been invited to sing 2 songs from the concert for the World Day Against Child Labor.
Woo! Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, isn't that fascinating? 8 and 9-year-olds speaking perfectly in 2 languages. And I think if we can learn something, it's okay. You can make a mistake. You grit your teeth and you get through. So thank you very much for that outstanding example of being strong. And now we would like to listen to you because you have prepared something wonderful together with the teachers.
I'm a rock in a mountain. I'm a
Yeah, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much. Merci bien. From all my heart, from all our hearts, and maybe the teachers get up as well because they've had a little contribution to this. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, I would like to invite everybody. Beate, come to my side. Everybody who's been part and parcel of this morning, everybody who's been up on a panel over there and over here, to come and join us here because we have one last aspect and one last thing. And I'm not quite sure whether I'm supposed to do this, but, seeing that we have the Director General here, how about Guy Ryder? If you take this from me, otherwise Beate has for everybody else a copy, and the copy of the book is 100 Years Tackling Child Labor, and we will distribute this now as you will go out in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. You will receive a copy as well. But this is also the time to acknowledge that there are a number of people in the room that have contributed to the fight against child labor in the ILO, with the ILO. Next to me is Simona Stein. Thank you very much for all. Maria Gabriel. You know, that's the point of not talking to somebody, of course. How could I do that? Maria Gabriela, thank you so much. And then I come over to you, sir, Simon Steins, and thank you very much for being with us. Great fight here. And now I'm just looking around. Lorenzo Proverbio, he's also supposed to, Lorenzo, he is a publisher, and we are very honored to have here Sir Roy Trotman. Would you also mind to join us here in front to have, you have been leading the workers group in the Convention 181 negotiations a number of years ago, still looking fit and still going strong in the fight against child labor. Thank you again, kids. Don't run away yet. There will be a break. There will be some drinks being served, ladies and gentlemen. And whilst we are distributing everything, whilst we're commemorating that there is this new aspect to the Scream module and everybody's enjoying themselves, I'm not too sure if you have to run away, but if you're leaving and if you go outside, there will be copies for each and every one of you as well. Maybe you can actually sort of say, this was an exceptional session here at the ILO. I'm not quite sure whether it's normally with as much song and dance. We hope, though, that you've enjoyed the last 110 minutes, 120 minutes with us. Ladies and gentlemen, these are our champions, and each and every one of you should carry and ought to carry the message out there, because you are our agents to decrease child labor to zero by 2025. Good luck on all of you. And maybe we can all scream. Scream. Kids, can you scream? 1, 2, 3. Scream! Woo! Yeah. Okay. So maybe now I part not the waters, but I part everybody here. So if you sort of, maybe you take the, okay, one close up, getting close, and then we part you so that we see a bit more of the kids. You know, if the photo hasn't been made, the event hasn't happened. So, you know, for future generations, we need to say here on this day in Geneva in 2019, Guy Ryder smiles because he's been smiling all year. Everybody smiles. And when the photographers are happy, we can actually invite you to sort of step apart a little bit. Don't run away, so that we can also see the children behind you. Yes, fantastic. So we'll have 2 groups.
Why don't you bring the children in the front, the adults? The adults are taller.
Okay. From my point of view, yes, I'm only asking. Do you know what, madam? Why don't you come to the front? Come. Yeah. Very nice. Okay, so, yes, you don't need to kneel down. Perfect. Yes. And maybe everybody else can now get up here. And I think that way the photographers are going to be really happy. Sir? Yeah, we take this away. Okay. Right. Oop. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So, right. We have to do with each other in the next session. Yeah. I'm not going to scream then. Is it okay?
I cannot come for the lunch because I have to.
No, can I? Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well.